On the other side. Morning, everyone. What a fabulous day we've got today, and you guys are going to love this session today. You are absolutely going to love it. We're so lucky to have you here, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
Oh, it's amazing. And Julie, you've come with such wealth of experience. I mean, 26 years as a teacher of psychology and a school leader. And now you're the founder of Still Human. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? Tell us all about Still Human.
Yeah. So as you say, 26 years teaching, head of department, senior manager, designated safeguard lead, head of pastoral. I think during my career, I probably wore all hats at the same time at a jaunty angle, but absolutely love education, really passionate about education, but also had a germ of an idea that I wanted to take psychology out of the classroom a little bit. And that combined with my absolute belief that staff matter. And so I combined my two passions, the idea that staff matter and my love of psychology, and Still Human emerged.
Wow, what an inspiration, Julie. What an inspiration. And you guys are going to love today's session. We've got so much to think about, and we're going to have lots of opportunities for you to reflect. And there's some really practical strategies coming through, and really important messages about staff wellbeing. And the things that we're going to cover are why staff wellbeing matters, all about wellbeing, all about responsibility, and all those external challenges and how we can overcome them. So that's really, really exciting. So we're very excited to have you here. We do love a hello, and we do love a question, don't we, Julie?
Yes. Made me feel like I'm not just, actually it's lovely having you here, Lucy, because the amount of times I've done a webinar and I'm literally talking to myself, and it's just awful.
It's really strange, isn't it? So all of you who are listening, if you're able to, please send us a hello. We do love a hello. We like to know that you're there. And then you've got Julie and myself for a whole hour. You know, all this experience between Julie and me. I've got 18 years of school leadership experience, and 30 years of a teaching experience. So there's so much help we can give each other. So if you've got a question, please put it in the chat. We are here to help you today. Let's help each other. That's what the community is all about. So anyway, I'm going to stop waffling and let Julie do her magic. So Julie, I'll let you share your screen, and then as I said, everybody, if you've got questions, please pop them in the chat, and if you want to say hello, please do. Remember hello, and I'll leave you to it, Julie.
Thanks, Lucy. I'll see you on the other side. I pop my glasses on now and I can just see myself, and I always just see my great Auntie Winnie looking back at me, which is slightly alarming. So yeah, thanks for that lovely introduction, Lucy. So as Lucy said, I'm Managing Director of Still Human. We support the wellbeing of staff in education, and I'm really proud to be part of a wider group, the Edwin Group. So we're going to focus on staff wellbeing matters this morning, unpick what we kind of mean by wellbeing, and really sort of think about staff wellbeing in the context of 2025, which I appreciate is a tough playing field at the moment. But I do have an absolute belief that when we look after our staff, when we invest in our staff to thrive and flourish, that is the best thing for our children and young people. So I'm not going to kind of go over that. Lucy's given you a little overview. I'm going to kind of launch straight into it, I think. And I'd like to start really on just kind of looking at the business case of why staff wellbeing matters. Now, I'm assuming that if you're listening in, that you probably already subscribe to this notion that staff wellbeing matters. But actually what I experience going into lots of trusts and going into lots of schools, that there are some kind of segments of the organisations or individuals who maybe still need a little bit of convincing that what we're talking about here isn't just something fluffy, it isn't something that's just a nice to have. And so really this sort of first section is focusing in on the business case of why staff wellbeing really does matter. So the current climate, I'm not going to dwell on this for too long because this is your lived experience and I'm sure that you could speak to it better than I can. But we know there's a cost of living crisis, our children and families, and some of our staff on a kind of living wage are actually experiencing poverty at the minute. We also know that there's been an increase in mental health issues. That figure's 1 in 5 for children aged 16. That increases to 1 in 4 over the age of 16, which means that our young people are experiencing mental health issues, but so are their parents, and actually so potentially could our staff members and their families. We know there's an increase in SEN needs, and that's kind of bringing those issues into mainstream, and the sort of issues around that expertise that's needed. We know that parental complaints have increased dramatically since COVID, that sort of accessibility that is maybe is demanded of parents, or that is seen that there's a right to kind of stand up and complain, whether that be on social media or coming into school. And what the Teacher Wellbeing Index tells us that 78% of staff across all roles report high levels of stress. Now that figure's actually remained static from 23 to 24. But if you just break that down, what we do know is that it's increasing for senior leaders. So 84% of senior leaders are experiencing or reporting high levels of stress. There's lots of other things I could have put on there, increase in behavioural issues. We know also there's increased in costs of staffing, there's falling roles of children numbers, and that's potentially leading to staff cuts, which is increasing the pressure on everyone, as well as the retention and the recruitment crisis that we find ourselves in. But what we also know is the Teacher Wellbeing Index reports that 50% of staff feel culture has a negative effect on their wellbeing. Now, I very much subscribe to the view that we need to control the controllables in times like that. There are many of those issues that are beyond our control. There's systemic changes that are needed across the education sector. But actually, it is in our power to control the controllables. And really, that's what we're going to look at today. It's saying that we accept that there's issues within the system that need to change in order to improve staff wellbeing, but there are also things that are within our control that can make a difference. So that's really what I'm going to focus on in the session today. Just to quote the lovely John Thompson here, I've had the pleasure of meeting John Thompson and also recording a podcast with him. John Thompson, along with Johnny Utley, wrote a fabulous book called Putting Staff First. And he basically says that if we do not ensure, first and foremost, our staff are happy, healthy, well qualified, highly motivated, hardworking, well-trained experts, they cannot be their best for their students. So I won't labour the point too much, but if we're looking at this, as I said, from a business case, the impact of investing in staff wellbeing, first and foremost, is going to improve health and wellbeing amongst our staff. That's good from a kind of moral perspective. We spend, I think they say 90,000 hours over our lifetime at work. Being at work is a huge part of our experience in life, and it's just a good thing if what we do in the workplace can improve the health and well-being of all individuals. That's better for the individuals, it's also better for society as well. We know that it improves job satisfaction and productivity when staff are feeling healthy and well, and also can have a positive impact on retaining our staff members, our valued staff members, and recruiting people within our schools and trusts if we know that this is a healthy, happy place to work. It can improve the overall culture. I always say the staff are like the wallpaper, aren't they? The wallpaper of the culture. And actually, often I hear conversations or, the culture, there's pockets of toxicity within the culture. And I would always say it's a really important conversation to have with your staff, that we can't just complain. We can't complain if we find ourselves stuck in a traffic jam, because actually we are the traffic. And neither can we complain about a culture that isn't working or that is toxic, because actually it isn't just the leaders that are leading on that culture. Of course, that has a huge impact, but actually we are all the culture, and everybody needs to recognise that. So when staff are kind of even just feeling 1% better, that's adding a lot of good stuff into the culture of the organisation. Huge positive impact on learners on so many levels. What the research tells us is that the well-being of staff when they are stressed and when they are absent, that is not good for attainment of our learners, and actually the converse is true. When they're happy and healthy and present and motivated, that can impact on attainment. But I also think it can impact on role modelling, well-being. I think we do a fantastic job now for our young people in terms of educating them around their well-being. But I actually do think that there's a bit of a gap generationally. I grew up in the 70s. Nobody in the 70s was educating me on how to look after my physical well-being. Nobody was telling me to go for a run, to eat some kale, to even drink some water. I genuinely don't believe I drank any water until about 1996. And now our young people are carrying around these 45-pound Stanley mugs full of their daily intake of water. And that's just fantastic. And nobody told me I had a mind back in the 70s when I was growing up either. Can you imagine? And they told me that I had a mind that needed looking after as well. My mum was of the belief that, if anything was wrong with you, no matter what, just have a bit of Lucozade and everything would be magically fixed. So I think that we're doing a really good job educating our young people, but I think if we've got our staff not modelling good well-being, if we've got our staff arriving at lessons really stressed out or responding to children and young people in a way that they're harried and they're overwhelmed and all of these sorts of things, is actually not a great way to model what well-being looks like. So there's many ways that investing in staff wellbeing can have a positive impact on our children and young people. There's obvious financial impacts if staff are present. Sickness rate can go down. That kind of cost associated with recruitment can also be reduced as well. And that sort of supply teacher cost, can have a positive impact on that. And we know that it's an Ofsted requirement as well. So there's a real significant business case there for investing in staff wellbeing that moves beyond that sort of fluffy concept of what we actually mean by staff wellbeing. Okay, so what do we mean by wellbeing? Now, if you're putting together any sort of plan, which I imagine you've got a plan or you've thought of a plan, it really starts with a definition of well-being, because having been in the kind of psychology space for more than 30 years, well-being is a fairly new word. This isn't a word I was using in my degree studies of psychology. And what I actually find is when I ask people, what do you mean by well-being? You're telling me that the well-being of staff needs improving, but what do you actually mean? And it's something that's sort of on the table, but people aren't able to easily define it. So start with a clear definition, share that with your staff, share it with your SLT team, and make sure that you all understand what you're talking about when you're talking about well-being. I'd also then say that once you've decided what your definition is, decide what you want it to look like, and make sure that you really understand what it currently looks like as well. But it all starts with a definition. So I'm going to share with you this definition, which I think is a great definition to work from. It's based on the World Health Authority definition, but it's actually the one that's used within the Education Staff Wellbeing Charter. I'm not sure if anybody is signed up to that charter. I think last time I had a look, there was about 2,800 schools had signed up to this charter, and it's been around for 3 or 4 years now. But this charter kind of gives you a little bit of a blueprint as to how to approach staff wellbeing. So it's well worth having a look at as a starting point. It's lacking a little bit in terms of the actual meat and the flesh of the how to, but as I say, it kind of is good for that kind of framework. So this is their definition: a state of complete physical and mental health that is characterised by high quality social relationships. Now, when I talk to schools and trusts and I have a look at their wellbeing policies, or I have a look at their charter, what I often find is that physical and mental health are done really well, particularly physical health. But what is lacking is this acknowledgement that social relationships matter as well. So when you're doing that definition, I would definitely include that you're looking at the physical, the mental, and the social well-being of your staff. And they kind of then become sort of like buckets that you can then start to think, right, well, what activities, what initiatives, what are we doing around those 3 areas that then can support the well-being of staff? And I'd also like to just bring in at this point, because the other thing that I find a lot is that I speak to school leaders or MAT leaders, and I ask them about their well-being, and they respond by saying, oh yeah, it's absolutely great. We've done loads. We've got our mental health first aiders in post. We have EAP in place. We've got counselling available. All of that is absolutely fantastic. But actually what you're talking about there is you're talking about mental ill health. You're talking about having strategies in place, having signposting in place, having support for staff who are experiencing mental ill health, which is absolutely non-negotiable. That actually isn't looking at well-being. So if you just think of your staff as being on a sort of normal distribution curve, within that curve, you're going to have a small percentage of staff with ill health, whether that's physical or mental ill health. The majority of staff are going to be in that middle. They're going to be okay. And some of your staff are going to be flourishing and thriving. I think in terms of the general population, that's between 11 and 14% of the general population fall into that thriving bracket. So when we're talking about well-being, we're talking about the well-being of everybody within your organisation. If you're just focusing on ill health, you're not focusing on the well-being of all staff. And actually, when we focus on the well-being of all staff in a sort of proactive, preventative measure, what we're potentially doing is stopping the slide of some of those people who are in that okay bucket, sliding into that ill health, and potentially moving some of those staff who fall into that okay bucket around more to the flourishing and thriving. Now, work isn't the only factor in this, and obviously there's lots of other variables that are feeding into the well-being of your staff that you cannot control. But if there are things in the workplace that can move people around this normal distribution curve, even just by 1%, then actually collectively that's going to start having an impact. Because if everyone can shift 1%, even if only 50% of your staff are shifted by 1%, that's going to feed into the overall culture. So just be clear that we're talking about mental ill health, but we're also talking about, positive mental health or the well-being of all staff. Okay, the next question when you're pulling this all together is to ask the question, who is responsible for wellbeing at work? And I do this with a lot of school populations, and I also advise leaders to do it with their staff. You don't need me in to ask this question. And I would ask staff, once you've defined and shared what your definition of wellbeing is that you're working towards, I'd ask them the question, who is responsible for wellbeing at work? And get them to actually itemize that in terms of individual people or roles. And it's really interesting to hear what they say. And once you've established who is responsible for wellbeing at work, I'd also then ask them to think about, and what responsibilities do they have? So again, I use the DFE Wellbeing Charter here. They state that the DFE, employers, governing boards, senior leaders, and individuals are responsible for staff wellbeing. All of those stakeholders play a role in taking some responsibility for the well-being of staff. Now, when you do that activity, what you might find is that some of your staff might say that you, as a senior leader, or the DFE, or the wider education sector, or Ofsted, all have a responsibility to staff wellbeing. Some staff aren't necessarily going to see themselves as having that individual responsibility from the off. And so that's a really useful conversation to have, that actually we've all got a part to play, and it's important to recognise that, take ownership of that, and recognise that there's a lot, I'm going to come back to that actually, there's a lot of feeding into that staff wellbeing piece, jumping ahead of myself. I also like the Anna Freud Centre definition. You can read that for yourselves, but it's this bit at the end. It's everyone's business. I always say in my workshops that it's a bit like safeguarding. Everybody has a role to play. When I became a designated safeguard lead many moons ago, and I was the only one in the organisation, it was very much seen that it was my job, that the safeguarding was something that I did, and everybody else kind of just got about their merry business, and it was nothing to do with them. And I think this similar shift is needed. Wellbeing isn't the school leader's job. Wellbeing isn't just the person in charge of staff wellbeing. Wellbeing is everybody's business, and it only works if everybody is playing their part. And they also bring in the community and parents. And the question I'd also asked is, do parents appreciate, do they understand that they have an impact on the well-being of staff? And if we want staff to be the best for their children, how do we kind of gatekeep? How do we protect our staff? And does the person who's doing the protective, if that's the person on your, on the reception desk who's maybe screening calls, do they have that training? Do they understand their role in protecting the well-being of staff and being able to field those calls? So what is that system? And what is that communication around parents understanding that they play a role in helping to help staff to do their job and to thrive and flourish as well? Okay, this is how we sum it up at Still Human. We believe that it's a collective responsibility, and good workplace wellbeing is the product of individuals taking some responsibility. I'd love it if somebody cooked my meals, put me to bed, and made sure I got adequate rest. That would be amazing if I could say I've got no agency over that, that's everybody else's responsibility. But it's about individually recognising that they play a role, but also recognising that their behaviour and their wellness impacts on others. If they as an individual are experiencing high levels of stress, if that's impacting on their behaviour and how they are as a colleague in the workplace, that impacts on their team, on their colleagues. We've got emotional contagion. We know that somebody who is experiencing sort of these difficulties, it can impact on others. Now, that's not to say that they can't bring their difficulties to work. I'm a real advocate of, all emotions are valid. Everybody needs to be able to express these emotions, and they need to be able to have that space to be able to talk through difficulties. And that is true in the workplace as well. So I'm not advocating that everybody has to be Pollyanna and skip around the corridors with this kind of toxic positivity. But people do need to recognise that how they are feeling and thinking and behaving does impact on everybody else as well. And the organisation has a duty to promote good staff wellbeing, to protect good staff wellbeing, and to restore good staff wellbeing. And these are the three threads that I'm just going to pick up on now. So how do we achieve this good workplace wellbeing then? Well, I'm a huge advocate that we can do this in a way that involves little to no cost, low cost or no cost ideas. And that's what we're really keen on sharing. This shouldn't be a thing that takes a lot of extra time or certainly a lot of extra resource and money. But the first thing to say is that doing wellbeing in the workplace is not one-off wellbeing activities. Now, it's not that these can't be part of the wellbeing strategy, but they're not going to have the impact. If doing wellbeing in your organisation is half a day at the end of term where you get some yoga specialists in and you have a picnic, that is all brilliant. Okay, I'm a huge fan of both yoga and picnics. Okay, and they can be super lovely, but that one-off at the end of term is not going to change that lived experience of your staff member every single day. So those one-off wellbeing activities are part of the picture, but they are definitely not the overall picture of a wellbeing strategy. And actually, in some cases, and you might have experienced this, they can backfire a little bit as well. I remember an experience of being invited to do some Tai Chi. And again, all over that, love that, at the end of a really busy, stressful term. And lots of staff really appreciated that, that chance to kind of wind down and connect and be together. But for a lot of staff, it really alienated them because they felt like, well, we've been through all of this and now that's what we get in terms of saying we're looking after your well-being. So anyway, the score. It can be a real complex bit of a minefield to navigate. So we do a lot of work around this. We work with a lot of organisations, particularly in trusts, about looking at creating a culture and a culture change that allows staff to feel like they matter and that they value every single day, not just as a one-off. We use this model here. I won't go into it too much, but just really briefly, culture is created at the top by your artifacts, by your mottos, your statements, your badge, your logo, your outward facing display. Helps kind of drive the culture, if you like, but only in a tiny way. A huge thing driving your culture is the values in which you operate. Now, what I tend to find that in schools and in trusts that these values are really well lived in terms of the student experience. And, assemblies and reminders and narratives are often hung on these values of kindness and respect and aspiration, whatever they may be. But with your value piece, what you can also do is flip that on your head and say, right, where do these values come into the staff experience? Okay, are we demonstrating kindness? Are we demonstrating caring? Are we demonstrating, pushing forward aspirations? And actually, what you find is when you make sure those values are embedded in the staff experience and you start using them when you're thinking about action plans or you're thinking about narratives or staff reviews, you can start really embedding those values like a stick of rock, and they can start driving those values as lived experience for staff. What we know, however, is that values and artifacts aside, it is the lived experience, those basic underlying assumptions of what does it mean to work here that actually drive the culture of stress. I didn't mean to say stress, that's because that's where I am in my next few sentences. What is driving the culture? So where that came from, a bit of a Freudian slip. But what are the things on a daily basis that are driving the culture? This is where you need to activate change. This is the level at which you need to get into and under those daily micro actions, interactions, those thousands of things that happen across a term or across the academic year that can influence how staff feel. They are the drivers of well-being. So let's go back to the promote, the protect and restore. So if I was putting together some sort of strategy or some sort of action plan, I'd ensure my definition was at the heart of it. I'd ensure to remind myself that I was looking at the physical, the mental and the social well-being of staff. Then I would use these three kind of pillars, and these are what we use within Still Human. This is our kind of model that I think makes it a really kind of simple task. How are we as an organisation going to promote the physical, mental and social well-being of staff? How are we going to protect it? And what are we doing around our restoration? So I'm just going to cover those for you. We usually do this training over a day or 2 days, so I'm going to do this very quickly, and there's a lot sitting underneath each of these buckets, as you can well imagine. So the first one is promote, and by this we mean how are you promoting this idea that staff wellbeing matters, and it's got to be modelled from the top. You've got to get buy-in from your leaders, from your governors. You know, are they really on board the wellbeing bus? Can you use that business case to get them on board the wellbeing bus and make sure that they're all bought into it and that they're all keen to start modelling it? And again, not from a Pollyanna perspective, but from all the things that we're about to look at. Do your governors need some training? Do your managers need some training? And we'll come back to that in a moment. But you as a leader, if you are indeed a leader listening to this, how do you model that? Okay, how do you bring that to the workplace? And again, that's not about toxic positivity. Okay, how do you show up as your authentic self who believes that well-being is really important and believes that your well-being is important as well? And sometimes that looks like leaving the building at 4 o'clock. And sometimes that looks like saying, I'm having the whole weekend where actually I'm going to go away and I'm going to really look after myself. Okay, making sure that staff and wellbeing are at the heart of policies and systems. Whenever new systems are coming out, whether that's an MIS system, whether it's the way that you book parents' evening, whether it's a new policy, be asking that question, is the wellbeing of staff being considered here? Okay, is it at the heart? And absolutely it's students first. Absolutely it's that, but it's also staff first. It's also staff matter. So what is the impact on staff? If we're bringing in a new system, can we take away an old system? Empower and educate staff. This goes back to what I said about growing up in the 70s. You cannot assume that all of your staff members understand how to look after their own well-being, okay? And I think particularly in the context of 2025, the educational landscape from the one that I joined in 1996 is a very different space. And so can you look at doing some awareness sessions, doing some signposting on things around stress management, stress awareness, the impact of stress? Could you do things around sleep? These don't have to cost hundreds of pounds. Yes, you can bring people in. I come in. We can do those sessions. But actually, you can, there's brilliant podcasts out there. There's website, there's resources that you can draw on. You can put them on a Teams channel. You can get other people to contribute. You can get some books for your staff room. Empowering and educating staff around their own well-being does not have to cost a fortune. Encouraging and modelling work-life balance, kind of already mentioned that, but bringing in conversations, really kind of celebrating what people are doing beyond just work, encouraging a life ethic as well as a work ethic, talking about people and their hobbies and, sticking in the briefing that so-and-so's run a marathon, and really advocating that, you know, what you do beyond the working day is super important. And if somebody needs to go home or leave early to go and see a sports day, or leave on time because they're going to a Tai Chi class, you know, accept that that is really important and advocate that that's a good thing. Your EDI feeds into all of this, and ensuring that you're looking at this from a staff perspective as well as a children and families perspective. Do you do anything around conversations, around neurodiversity of your staff, around menopause, around awareness? You know, is that kind of brought to the forefront? There's a great day, I think it happens around March time, maybe it's April, Bring Your Whole Self to Work Day. Is that something that you could do, and just take that opportunity to make sure that staff feel like they're seen and they're heard for who they are? And make sure your wellbeing strategy or charter or whatever it is that you're using is really visible and a lived experience. Strategies tend to be, policies, I should say, tend to be in the background in a drawer and looked at when they're needed. But where's your strategy? If you're using the DFE charter or creating your own, is it there? Is it on notice board? Is it referred to all the time? Is it brought up in staff meetings? Make it really visible. Make sure that staff absolutely know that their wellbeing is the heart of what they do, what you do. So shout about it as a school. Okay, protection is really in terms of what it is that you can do on a daily basis. Looking after the physical needs of your staff, or certainly supporting them to look after their physical needs, is really important. There's that saying, isn't there? Maslow before you bloom. I love the Maslow triangle. I think it can be really helpful when thinking about staff wellbeing. You know, are the physical needs of staff supported and championed? You know, is it really kind of made easy for staff to be able to sit down and eat their lunch? Is there a space? Is it encouraged, even if it's just for 20 minutes? You know, that rest and digest state. Is it easy to get a drink of water? If you're teaching every period in a secondary school, where are the water fountains? If you're teaching on the 3rd floor and you've only got a 15-minute break, is it possible to get downstairs and fill your water bottle? If the answer is no, is that something that could be looked at? So really make sure that those physical needs of staff are protected within the working day and also championed. You know, is there an outside space? Are staff encouraged to go for a walk? Could staff be encouraged to go for a walk? Do they stretch at all? Okay, the amount of schools that I go into and ask people, you know, do you ever just stretch when you're at the photocopier? And everybody looks at me like I'm mad, but they're carrying their stress up here. They've got headaches, they've got neck ache. They're holding their body in that brace stress position. And that drives those feelings of stress and actually can end up in feeling ill. Advocating and creating a psychological safe environment. This is huge. Okay, we're all just, as human beings, all we want is to feel safe. And again, we're usually really good at that in school environments, you know, in terms of codes to get into doors and making sure that staff and students feel physically protected. Psychological safety is feeling like it's safe to be ourselves, feeling like it's safe to speak up, feeling like it's safe to say things are difficult, that things are hard, that you possibly need help over things without a fear of being judged or being criticised or being humiliated or worrying if your job is safe because you've spoken up and said that things are difficult. Psychological safety, though, is also about taking risks. Is it creating a culture where it's okay to say, can I just try? Okay, do I have the autonomy and am I empowered to try and do things a little bit differently? And this psychological safety needs to be built. It needs to be built by leaders. It needs to be built by managers in the same way that we build it for our children in the classrooms. We make it a safe place for them to be able to give an answer and it's okay if it's wrong, to try things in a different way, to model, to make mistakes, but ultimately turn up as themselves. And we need to be able to emulate this in our wider space, in our staff space too. That might involve some training. That might involve some external training, or it might involve some training about somebody take it on board as a project. You know, there's brilliant, as I say, there's brilliant podcasts out there. We actually have a podcast series, not just on psychological safety, but on staff wellbeing. But there's also brilliant books out there that all talk about this. Just as an aside, the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, they offer a free toolkit. It's actually around stress, but that's worth a look at as well, an education-specific one. Lots of ideas in there that are free and that could be implemented. Connections, just going back to that training, even just having that conversation with your managers, with your SLT team, do they know what psychological safety is? Do we feel like we do it? And posing yourself them questions, how could we get better? Encouraging connections and opportunities for positive emotions. When we go back to that human thing. Basically, we want to survive as humans. We're more likely to survive if we feel safe, and we're more likely to survive if we feel connected to our tribe. It can actually be quite isolating working in a school community, despite the fact we're amongst 300, 500, 1,000 other people. You know, because we might work in silos, we might work in our classroom, and as leaders, we can maybe find ourselves in a really lonely position. Now, those connections don't have to be, big nights out. They don't have to be going to another tribute night unless that's your thing, fill your bucket. I don't think that's a saying. But, it's about connections within the working day. How can you create more connections in staff briefings, in staff meetings? How can you mix people up so they're working with different people and making different connections? Could you give the first 5 minutes of every meeting just a time and a bit of space just to have a conversation? And also some time to experience positive emotions. In every CPD day, I would always advocate you find some time to have a bit of fun, and I don't mean forced fun, but just some time where you maybe do a little scavenger hunt, or you maybe do a bit of a quick quiz, something just to bring in some amusement, some joy, a bit of laughter, and a bit of kind of social connection. Celebrate the good things, practice gratitude, practice saying thank you, celebrate the work of the staff as often, as regularly as you can, even just those little things, little shout outs, little award ceremonies. Look at ways that could be done, because that level of feeling appreciated in a time when the press and parents and lots of people are devaluing the kind of profession, how can we find ways to make staff feel consistently good about what they do and see the value? Great CPD, we know that staff, when they feel invested in, can go a long way to kind of keeping staff motivated and invested. And learning is a great way to improve wellbeing as well. So are we encouraging those CPD opportunities for staff to grow and develop? Well, it might be into a leadership position, but also are we just getting them excited about what they do? Okay, are we you can do this really easily. You could do a showcase about teaching and learning. Everybody has to bring a show and tell, sharing across the school, and giving everybody a chance to shine and celebrate something they do well is good for their individual well-being, but you're also creating this culture of sharing and learning from each other and motivating and inspiring. Conversations around workload. We know that workload is a huge issue. My colleague, Dr. Mary Bilton, she did her PhD on workload and attrition. And in our work, we look at this, we look at the concept of workload a lot. And of course, workload is, in terms of our to-do list, is too big, and the time and the resource to do that is mismatched. But what we would advocate is, when you're doing any piece of work on workload, Recognise that sometimes it's not the quantity of work, it's actually the value of the work to the individual. Do they think it's meaningful? Do they think it's of value? Do they think that it matters? And so if a staff member is citing workload as an issue, or you're doing your end of year survey, rather than just talking in time and quantity, ask questions around value and do a piece of work making sure that that the work that staff do does feel meaningful. But actually, if there's work that still has to be done, that staff understand the value and the meaning behind being asked to do those tasks. And that big piece around stress, which I feel like I've already mentioned. Have a look on the HSE free toolkit, but also try and find out what the stresses in the workplace are. You can't assume that you know what they are. Don't promise that you can remove them, but can we look at them and see whether there are ways around reducing stress? Is the individual doing things to introduce stress? Can we collectively work together to reduce stress? Okay. And the final little bit for this, I'm very conscious of the time, is the restoration piece. And actually, when I work with schools and colleges and trusts, I tend to find this is the bit that's done well. This is the bit around those mental health first aid leads, the employee assistance programme, the signposting, that staff know how to respond if they recognise signs of ill health, they know how to respond in a crisis. And there's usually lots of great work being done around reducing stigma. Mental Health Awareness Week is coming up on the 12th of May, I think. Get those posters up, have conversations around reducing that stigma, about talking about feeling anxious, feeling like you've got low mood, and make sure staff know where that's, where they can go for support around that. And keep reiterating that, because I was actually working with a trust just yesterday, and they said they feel like they do this bit really well, but they do it in a very sort of passive way, in that there's a poster on the staff room wall, and at the beginning of every year they maybe talk about where staff can receive support. But actually, sometimes when staff are hearing these messages isn't the point at which they need that resource. So they might sit there at the beginning of the term thinking, oh, do you know what, I feel tickety-boo, I'm on this and I'm all over this. And then something changes mid-year. There's got to be this consistent flagging, signposting, make it visible, stick it at the end of every briefing, sticking it at the end of every sort of newsletter, make sure staff know where to go if and when they need that support. And that's kind of that in a nutshell. As I say, that's kind of 2 days worth of course all rolled into, but maybe I'm hoping it's given you some little bit of food for thought, thinking about what you could be looking at for September term as you move forward. Who can you get involved? Who can you get supporting you and helping with you with some of those moving parts of the wheel? But it absolutely starts with defining what you mean by well-being. Once you've done that, working out what staff wellbeing currently looks like and where you want to take it to, then get your staff on board and make sure that everybody has responsibility to help move this staff wellbeing journey forward. This is not just on you or on an individual. I just want to finish with a little bit around this individual level. And I want to speak to you as leaders or staff working in a school. We do work with leaders around that kind of feeling well whilst leading well. And again, one of my colleagues is a former primary head teacher, and her lived experience feeds into a lot of the work we do around this. But as leaders, you owe it to yourselves to look after yourselves. I always say, treat yourself like £1 million racehorse. This is not the time to say that everybody else's needs come first. Of course that happens. Just by the very nature of your role in any given day, you are giving yourself, lending your nervous system, giving your energy, regulating your emotions to keep at bay maybe anger and irritation in order to serve your staff, your community, your children, your parents. That is what the job is. However, you can only do that for so long without putting back in the energy that you are expending. If you don't put that energy back in, then there's a potential that burnout can happen. Or there's a potential that every weekend or every holiday, you find your mind is still on that treadmill. You can't switch off. You spend the first week just like feeling a bit antsy, a bit uncomfortable. You can't settle to read, to relax. You're sleeping poorly. And actually, holidays can be then quite stressful in themselves because you're still running at 1,000 miles an hour. If you find yourself in that state, or you're headed for burnout, or you've got that kind of indicators of ill health, it's really time to take stock. If you're not there, and again, you're sat there feeling motivated and well, then do make sure that you start putting these things in now. Okay, these can be really preventative and really helpful. It starts with valuing yourself. It starts with putting yourself at the top of the to-do list. Okay. And it starts by saying that I can only serve if I too am full. And what does that full look like? Decide what being well looks like for you in terms of what are your social relationships, what do you want them to look like, what do you want your physical energy to look like, and what do you want, how do you want to feel mentally? What are your states you want to be experiencing more? And then make some daily non-negotiables. These might be 2-minute activities, 5-minute activities, but decide what they are. Now, you can read all sorts of stuff and you can say, right, if I get up at 5 o'clock and join the 5 a.m. club and I do an hour's workout, that is what's going to make me well. By all means, listen to that and be inspired, but then throw all of those to one side. What are your daily non-negotiables? Mine are reading, going for a walk, making sure that I drink water throughout the day, and making sure that I have some connection throughout the day with somebody who's going to make me laugh, seeking out that radiator. And also some quiet time. I get up early to do that. You'll have your own list. Stick to them, do them every single day. Empower yourself, read, learn, podcasts, work out what those things are to you, okay? And then hone in on those basics, those real key things that are going to keep you well. Put some boundaries around your sleep, protect that. Put some boundaries around what you're eating as much as possible, and what tweaks can you make to make sure that you're feeding yourself from the inside out. And make those basics part of your non-negotiables. Work on your mental health. You know, what are you doing for your mental wellness? Mindfulness is my big thing. It might be something different for you. It might be journaling. It might be walking in nature, getting some downtime. How are you processing all of those emotions that you are squashing in order to do your job? They've got to get out somehow. Social wellbeing, I've already kind of mentioned that. Where are you connecting? The head teacher chat provides those amazing forums for you to be able to connect with other leaders who might feel similar. Use them as your social connections. Connect with those people in your lives who are going to bring in and draw the good stuff and make you feel less isolated. And recognize the signs of stress. Really hone into what are your little canaries in the coal mine? When are your canaries singing? What are the whispers? What are the early signs of stress that can indicate you actually need to go and take a bit of time? Okay, if you've walked in after a really busy day, there's a trainer lying in the hallway, can't speak. There's a trainer lying in the hallway. Does the trainer get it? Does it get chucked? Does the owner of the trainer then get it in the neck for leaving the trainer? Are they your signs that stress is up here? Okay, and once you start being aware of them and recognizing, what are you going to do to try and bring those down? And you absolutely owe it to yourself. You get around 4,000 weeks, according to Oliver Burkeman. And I'd like to think that in them 4,000 weeks, the jobs that we do and the work that we do is super important, but not the cost of our health. And within those 4,000 weeks, it's important that we find some time to invest in making ourselves feel well, in thriving and flourishing, or just feeling a bit more okay than we already do. And it all comes back to the belief that staff matter. Yes, we're here to do our job. Yes, we're here. And I think we're really privileged to work in the sector that we do. To do that and to be the best we can be, then we need to remember that we matter and that staff matter too. I'm going to bring Lucy in here. I probably nearly ran over my allocated time yesterday, Lucy, didn't I? I had a lot to say.
Oh my word, Kerry. I told you guys you were in for a treat. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. You covered so much. I don't know how you did it in an hour. Well, 55 minutes. It's incredible. So thank you so much. We have had a really good question, actually.
Yes.
It's a really, really important one because I've been there. I've experienced this. You know, you have your staff members and you do everything you can possibly to signpost them to wellbeing strategies. You've got lots of opportunities for them to tap into them, but then you've always got those ones, you know, those ones who say, oh, there's nothing here, you don't look after my wellbeing.
Yeah.
Like, how would you get around that? Because that's a tricky situation, isn't it? You know, we've all been there.
Yeah, we have it. Yeah, and it does come up a lot. I think that's where it's really important to be clear whose responsibility wellbeing is. And I think that's a piece of work that you need to do with whole staff and you need to keep revisiting. Because once that is really established, then you can bring that into conversations with individuals. You've got that boundaried approach to then be able to look and say, well, actually, as an organisation, these are the things we've done to try and protect your well-being, whether that's, I don't know, boundary time away from the children, whether that's strategies, whether that's some flexible working. You know, you've got that kind of narrative to be able to say, we put these things in place to protect. We're doing as much as we can to promote your wellbeing. Here's what we've done, but actually this is a joint collective and they are all we can offer. And I do believe that sometimes, and that's, you know, I'm not saying that's your first point of call, but I think there has to be, you know, some individual responsibility, and maybe that role or this position or this environment skill is maybe not going to be the right fit if that person still sees that as a barrier. But I think staying true to that, this is a collective responsibility, and being able to sit there as a leader and say, actually, in terms of responsibilities, we've covered these, and I'm confident in that, and I really want to support you, but actually, you know, there is little else we can do because of where we're at and the job we're in. Does that make sense, Lucy? I think it's about setting the stall out and try to be very boundaried, because otherwise I think it's very easy for the leader to then still be going, right, well, it must be my fault. I must have another solution. But whilst accepting that staff have to then also buy into those initiatives, don't they?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, because what you've got to do is protect your well-being. So, you know, and often members of staff are going through a difficult time at home, and they're coming to school and they're expecting to feel better, and when they get to school, they're not feeling better. So it might be just a well-being check-in, but at the end, it really says you must look after your well-being. Your well-being must, you know.
Yeah, I think compassion goes two ways, doesn't it? And I think compassionate leadership is really important. But the compassionate leadership is not taking full responsibility for somebody else's feelings. It's what can we do to help? It's having that, but it's compassion is self-compassion as well. And, you know, there's a point at which, you know, I've signposted and supported and I've checked in with them and we've done all of this, but at the expense of my well-being, there's nothing else he could do. And that still can be done and delivered in a really kind and compassionate way. You know, I think that is really key as well. And as you say, Lucy, to recognise this individual is having a difficult time. I think compassion can still be at the heart of that conversation, but staying boundaried.
Yeah, and then it comes back to what you said earlier, you know, in terms of shout about it. keep talking about it in staff
Yes.
meetings. Look what we're doing for wellbeing. Look what we're doing for this. Use that conversation all the time. And eventually, it might take a little while, but it will go in that actually
Yes.
we're a good school for wellbeing. We do look after
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And sort of
Yeah.
almost model if you want them to think and feel, because sometimes it takes a lot of persuasion to feel actually this is a good school and I am looked after, and, you know, but it does take time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lucy. And often I think that comes down to what we think well-being is.
Yeah.
And I think that actually, as schools, we'll be doing loads of amazing things that staff won't really think, oh yeah, actually that's good for my well-being. So it is about shouting about this and, really establishing that definition, and all of these things that we do, providing free tea and coffee in the staff room, whatever all of those things are, making sure that there's a caveat of kind of going, and isn't this fantastic? These are all the things that we do for your well-being. Exactly that, Lucy.
And then we've had a really good meaty question. James, I love questions like this. Thank you for asking this one. And it is, what would you love to see change at a system level to stop head teachers hitting breaking point? I mean, wow. Brilliant question, James. Do you want to go first, Julie, and then I'll go next?
I think, have you got some ideas on how to respond to that one? It's huge. Like 59 minutes into our.
I know. To be honest with you, James, that could be a whole other webinar. So I would say absolutely, that's what we're on a mission for. A head teacher chat is all about. It's not right that leaders are going into breaking point. It's not right that leaders are on their own. It's not right that leaders don't have the information or the support around them. Having been a leader for 18 years, and Jonathan's been a leader for 26 years, we've probably seen and done everything. We've been in those situations where you think, what on earth do I do now? It's like, where do we go from this? And who do I turn to? Who do we ask? And that's why Head Teacher Chat is what we do. That's what we do. It's that mission of no one's on their own. Everyone's got support. There's always somebody out there who's got an answer. And that's what the community is all about. So thank you so much for being part of our community. It's really lovely to have you here. And that's what we're trying to do. That's our mission, if you like, to support head teachers, to prevent them reaching breaking point. But in terms of system level, I think the key is in that word system. There are so many systems that have just been layered upon layered upon layered, aren't there, Julie? Since we graduated in 1991. Since then, there's been so many changes. And instead of saying, right, that's working well and this isn't, they've just sort of added another thing and then added another thing. And I think from a system level, we need to, as a collective community, talk about what's great, what works well, celebrate those things, and then when things aren't working well, we talk about those together and we come to some sort of conclusions and solve those problems together. And that's what the community feed is all about. Ask the questions, share that experience with us, because if there might be somebody out there who's also going through the same thing but feels they can't ask, it's really important to say, hang on a minute, this isn't right. How do we solve this? I do think that there's so many issues in that question, James. We could probably go on for 3 days.
Yeah, I wonder, can I just echo really what you said, Lucy? And from a systems point of view, I think of it being like, we put a blanket on. You put a blanket on to keep warm, but every system, we forgot to take the blanket underneath off, and we're exhausted and overheated, and drowning, and it's too heavy, and we've absolutely, that's what's happened over. Over decades. So it absolutely is that. We work with Head Teacher Chat because I personally really believe in what they're doing, because I think you need to operate as a collective. I think there's two benefits. One is it's supportive, and other leaders, as Lucy said, might feel in the same position, but also might have some different perspectives, different answers. but also as a collective, you're really strong, and your voice then can be heard, and making sure that people are hearing the voice of the collection of Head Teacher Chat. So, you know, I think that is super important. And I'm not here to kind of promote here, but you know, our podcast series that we do is a free resource, and we speak to CEOs, to leaders who are trying things a bit differently. And I just think it's a great resource for any of your listeners to again add into that gorgeous community that you've got here at Head Teachers Chat.
It's amazing, yes. And we love what you do, Julie, and it's so important. And I think nowadays, it's more important than ever. You know, as James said, there are head teachers who are hitting breaking point, and it goes back to, you know, put your own oxygen mask on first. Look after yourself. You are very important. You are respected. Our community will look after you. Come and say hello if you're struggling or you need some help. Come and shout out. Reach out to Julie. Julie can come in and support you. There are people out there, good people, who are willing to be there to support you. So please do get in touch. And on that note, Julie, do you want to share your amazing contact details, which are on the next slide?
I think so. That's everything that we do. Our website explains all of that, whether you want us to come in and work with your staff to empower them and educate, whether you want us to work with your leaders, or whether you're interested in something kind of strategic, or whether you want us to work with your governors and trustees as well. So that's everything that we do, and this is where you can find us. So our website is there, www.stillhuman.co.uk. It's got all our services on there. It also houses our podcast, should you want to listen. Or reach out, I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. Or drop me an email. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Julie. And we'll pop all of those links underneath this recording. So, the recording will go up into the masterclass library. So if you are watching this on demand, thank you for tuning in. We'll put all of your links there, Julie, so people can get in touch with you. I'm sure you can all see how fabulous Julie is. Thank you so much, Julie, for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Lucy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been fabulous. So have a lovely day, everybody, and we hope that was helpful. Please do get in touch if you've got any questions. You can always drop us an email or send us a DM in the community, and we'll be very happy to help. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye now.